The reason why I say we had a win tonight is because the Republican Party had to spend almost $2 million in a smear campaign to get this win. They should never have to spend money on a ruby red district.
That was the Democrat who did not prevail last night, but again, a 24-point swing. Tim, I know there's a lot of sort of political press around the MAGA money machine, but you have to be able to deploy the money competently and strategically. Yeah. And I wonder what you make of the money situation right now.
Yeah, two thoughts on this. One, the Republicans are going to have more money this midterm, I think, for the first time in a decade or two. Maybe Marilyn Andrew might be better on that on when the last time this was. But the Democrats have actually been better at fundraising since Obama. And so that is something the Democrats are going to have to contend with. Donald Trump, if you go back to last year, what was he doing this time last year? Shaking people down, like shaking down CEOs, shaking down the richest people in the world. Yeah, they were funding his ballroom. Yeah, he's still doing that. But like that was what he was doing really effectively when he first came in. I said you just have to like recall, like right now he's kind of flailing. When he first came in, he was super effective at getting rich people to, do favors for them in exchange for getting a bag for his super PACs. So they're going to have a ton of money. Here's the problem though. Like advertising, you need to be able to have something to sell. If the dogs won't eat the dog food is the old phrase in advertising, it doesn't do you any good. And right now, if people are experiencing real pain economically, and if people are looking at him and thinking this guy, doesn't have his eye on the ball at all, and I don't feel like my concerns or grievances or needs are being met, they can run all the ads they want. And it's not going to work. So what they can do is go into these red districts, some of those states I was talking about in the last segment, and save ground, right? Go into Iowa and smear the Democratic candidate and try to get their number down with Republican voters. And they'll probably be able to use their money to do that relatively effectively. And that's what Democrats have to combat. So just one other thing on this I just do want to say. A lot of times when we talk optimistically about Democrats, I know all you all have heard this from people. It's like, well, they're going to cheat anyway. You do hear this. Like, they're going to cheat anyway. They're going to try to rig it anyway. So who cares about the midterms? Democracy, when Trump won, is lost. And I just want to point out that, like, don't you think that they wanted to cheat in Wisconsin last night? Like, don't you think that they wanted to cheat in all these special House elections that they've had recently? It's easier said than done. And the Republicans are trying. They tried to do it with the redistricting and it failed. They're going to try to do it with the mail-in ballots and the challenging. We need to be vigilant. You have Mark Elias on here every week talking about this. There are good people out there making sure that we're being vigilant and fighting this. But I do think it's also important to just talk about the reality here, which is that they might try to use their money and they might try to cheat. But, sometimes reality is more powerful than their misinformation campaign and their efforts to jerry-rig what's going to happen in the midterms.
I mean, Tim, it's a really important point because it is one of the tactics they deploy with some success from the autocrats' toolbook to make the pro-democracy side think that it's fruitless, it's cheap. That actually costs nothing, right? So every public statement Trump makes, every time he burps out something about the SAVE Act or cutting off midterm voting or sending troops, that's free. Trump doesn't ever have a message, so he's not distracting from anything else. And it creates anxiety in the pro-democracy coalition. And if one person decides to, run a different errand instead of waiting an extra hour to vote, that tactic succeeds. I think combating that political tactic is as important as any other political mission in the next 6 months.
Totally. They want us to be tired. They want us to feel disillusioned. That's what they want. They want to wear you down. It's all part of the, Steve Bannon policy of the fire hose of that's what they want to do, and it hasn't worked so far. And I think that it's important to just accept that truth while going forth and doing tactically the things that need to be done, or volunteering, or do whatever can be done to continue to help pro-democracy candidates in elections this year and beyond.
Basil, I think there's a lot of conversation, and you three were good about coming back right after the election. There's some people that were like, I can't have these conversations. But some of it was about, Democrats have to be the better party, right? You just have to be like the tailgate tent that everyone wants, like what's on your barbecue. Everyone wants the music you're playing. Everyone wants to be, and it feels like with the people of Minneapolis and the culture following the people of Minneapolis. And folks like Bruce Springsteen and Robert De Niro sort of throwing in where a lot of celebrities have not, behind the people. I think the people started it, and that's really important. Democrats are starting to look like the more fun party. I mean, how important are the vibes, or do Democrats just reject all that sort of non-scientific stuff?
I don't think Democrats reject it, but I will tell you what I experience, and I think it gets to your question. A lot of times when people come up to me and they ask me, what can I do? What can I do? I feel overwhelmed. And I say, well, my advice to you is what the advice I take myself, which is I can't boil the ocean, but I have a platform. Wherever I am is my platform. If I'm speaking to you, one other person, that's my platform. And I think what that suggests to folks is that they have an agency. And that was what I think may have been missing very early on. It's the, oh my God, what am I going to do with the sort of rapid fire thing that Trump does all the time? It's like, how am I going to protect myself and my community against what's happening? And that's why the marches, the gatherings, whether it's Minneapolis, whether it's No Kings, they're so important because it gives people this hope that, I'm not the only one out here that feels this way. And the fact that those marches, those gatherings, those rallies have gone into ruby red districts, they've actually penetrated more parts of the country than could be considered just Democratic or just liberal. It gives people an opportunity to belong to something. And that's critically important, particularly about what Tim said. Yes, the Democrats have been better about raising money, but not just for the party. So the hope is that all of this is actually an organizing operation to drive resources, drive energy to the infrastructure to get folks elected.
Mitch, the No Kings movement, before its last, I think, 8 million plus turnout in, as Basil's talking about, ruby red corners of our country, had more people saying they identified with the No Kings movement than said they identified with MAGA. How do you take all these sort of good things that are people driven, which is the most powerful sort of political thing out there, as we all know, and sort of push them into election results?
Well, I would say a couple things. I have 5 kids, and we like to play ping pong, and all my kids are better than me. And I know that, but I try to talk them out of it by trash talking the whole game and getting them off of focus, and then I beat them. And that's what the Republicans.
It works.
Well, yes, it works. You can talk people out of stuff. You can trash talk. Ask Larry Bird. So what I want to tell the American people is Donald Trump is a loser. He's a paper tiger. He is the emperor with no clothes. And no matter what they do, they're going to talk like everything's going great. They're going to try to demoralize you. But here's the thing: someone knocks you down, get up off your ass and fight back. And when you do, and you start winning, start feeling good about what you're doing, do more of it. Don't get over optimistic, and then find friends. I think Tim is right about money. There's always going to be a lot of money on both sides. They're going to say they're going to spend more than us, but they cannot overcome what Donald Trump has done to America. American people have gotten his number. And the reason you know that is because in all of these elections that are being held, it's not base elections that are winning. It's like what's happening in ruby red districts that Donald Trump won by many, many points. That's why the race last night in Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional district is so important, because that's a plus 37 district for Donald Trump. And we closed a 25-point gap. Now, we just didn't do it last night, and we just didn't do it in Georgia. We did it in Wisconsin, not just in the Supreme Court race, in the law races. So there is good indication that no matter what state you're in or where you're running, that people who are in the middle or people who are on what's the right of the middle are actually starting to say, we have had enough. Now, you got to stay in there and fight. You got to make sure that you do your part. When people ask, what can I do? My answer is, well, whatever it is that you can do. If you got a big microphone, use it. If you have to go into the locker room with your friends who are talking trash, talk back to them and walk and knock on doors, and we will win. We're gonna win in the midterms. There's no question about it, but we got to fight hard.
Mitch, I want to talk to your kids before ping pong night and quote their dad and say,
I want to get invited to ping pong night.
Take the game away from
get
them.
off your ass and fight. I also want to come to ping pong night.
Me too. Where's my invite?
Exactly what we need. Mitch Lander, Tim Miller, Basil Smikle, the best that there is. Thank you for having this conversation with us.